SOA. If you need technical support at any time today, just send an email to soa@compartners.com. You can also download a copy of the slides from the links box, and you can, of course, enter a question for the candidates at any time during the webinar. I'd like to introduce the participants on today's webinar. We have Jerry Brown, current President-Elect of the SOA. He will be moderating the discussion with our President-Elect candidates. And, of course, we have our candidates, Jim Glickman, Mike Lombardi, and Sue Sames. I'll now turn it over to Jerry, who will provide an overview of today's session. Jerry?
Thank you, Pat. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. During this webinar, which we have extended by 30 minutes, we will be talking about the SOA elections, including a proposed bylaws amendment that fellows will be asked to approve. But the bulk of our time is dedicated to your hearing directly from the three candidates for President-Elect. SOA elections open August 22nd and close on September 9th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time sharp. In this election, you'll be voting for the SOA board, including President-Elect and section councils. As I mentioned, fellows will be asked to consider an amendment to the bylaws. The SOA board approved changes to the SOA bylaws, Article 17 regarding amendments, which requires approval by the fellows because any bylaw amendment affecting the substantive rights of members also requires a vote of the fellows. Our rationale for amending this bylaw is simple. It eliminates the meeting requirement and reflects the way members actually vote today by proxy. Members do not attend the scheduled live meeting and instead vote electronically or through the mail. While the SOA anticipates continuing to see more than 25% of fellows participating in bylaw amendments that simulate high interest levels, amendments with lower interest may not receive the same attention, and therefore we may not meet the minimum requirements for adoption. The minimum floor under the bylaw amendment is the greater of 10% of all fellows or 2/3% of those voting. The new procedures build in flexibility while maintaining a meaningful approval requirement. Of course, the primary purpose of today's session is to learn more about the views of our President-Elect candidates so that you can make an informed decision when it comes time to vote. Let me explain how today's session will work. We'll start off by having the candidates introduce themselves and briefly discuss their visions for their terms as President-Elect and President. I will then ask each candidate one question, and this question was shared with the President-Elect candidates in advance. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to this and all other questions. Then we'll open it up for the Q&A portion of the session, and I encourage you to submit your questions at any time during the webinar. We have received some questions in advance, and I'll be including some of those questions as well. When submitting questions, please do not direct your question to any particular candidate. We want each candidate to have the opportunity to answer the same questions. I'm sure each of our candidates would be more than happy to respond to any of your individual questions by email. So with that, let's get started. We're going to start with an introduction of each of our candidates, and we've held drawing by lot, and we're going to start with Jim Glickman. Jim, please introduce yourself. You have 2 to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Jim Glickman. For the past 28 years, I've been the president and CEO of Life Care Assurance Company. Just prior to that, I worked for PennCorp Financial as a vice president managing the life and health pricing and reinsurance areas. From 1972 to 1981, I first worked at CNA and then at positions of increasing responsibility at Maccabees Mutual and Pacific Standard, primarily as a life and annuity pricing actuary. Originally, I became interested in the actuarial field when, as a junior in high school, my dad, a general agent for Connecticut General at that time, invited Paul Campbell, one of Connecticut General's actuaries, to our home for dinner during one of his visits to my dad's agency in Chicago. I was immediately hooked on becoming an actuary and began taking my exams the next year. Ever since, I've been focused on promoting the opportunities within the actuarial profession to those I meet, and have always tried to give back to the actuarial profession for all it has done for me. My volunteer activities with the SOA began in 1984, at that time primarily through presenting at SOA spring and annual meetings. Since then, I've participated as a speaker in over 100 presentations at SOA and other national meetings, with the largest single portion of those on behalf of the SOA. My volunteer activities accelerated dramatically in 1999 when I organized and became the founding chairperson of the long-term care section, as well as its chairperson during both my first and fifth years on the LTC Section Council. In 2000, I helped establish the annual Long-Term Care Broker World Survey, now in its 17th year, serving as its author from 2001 through 2004. Also in 2000, I helped establish the annual Intercompany Long-Term Care Insurance Conference, which has its 17th annual conference next March. Since 2005, I have served as the volunteer executive director for that conference's nonprofit association, where I've learned firsthand how a nonprofit organization can optimally operate. Also in 2005, I was elected to the SOA board and then re-elected in 2008 to serve as vice president. I've been married to my wife, Marlene, for 40 years next Monday. My oldest son, Steve, is married to Kristen, who are both lawyers living in D.C. My youngest son, Robert, a software engineer, and his fiancée, Gina, a sales rep, live in Seattle. And my middle son, Mark, and his wife, Sharda, both FSAs, live in Los Angeles with their son, Samuel, who has just turned 1 year old 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, Jim. We also have Mike Lombardi. Mike, please introduce yourself. You have 2 to 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Mike Lombardi. I'm currently president of my actuarial consulting firm, MLBC, which provides insurance companies and regulators with advice on business strategy, mergers and acquisitions, reinsurance, and corporate actuarial challenges. During my career, I've held senior executive level positions in large U.S., Canadian, and U.K. organizations, including senior vice president at Prudential Assurance, executive vice president at RGA Reinsurance, and managing principal at Willis Towers Watson. Like many actuaries, I stumbled into the profession by accident. I was good at math, but when I asked my teachers what I could do with it, I got the same answer I got from my Latin teacher. I could always teach it to others. Later on, I was studying medicine, but needed a summer job. That summer, I got an offer from an insurance company, and I learned what an actuary was, and I've loved the profession ever since. In terms of volunteering, I started volunteering shortly after achieving my fellowship. I joined an exam committee, and having caught the volunteer bug, I followed that with over 30 years of extensive volunteer work on committees, sections, and boards. I was eventually elected president of the Canadian Institute of Actuaries. Later on, I ran for and was elected a vice president of the Society of Actuaries. I've written articles and made presentations at insurance industry events and SOA meetings. I've also presented to over a dozen different actuarial institutes, associations, or societies spanning 5 continents. Now I am running for President-Elect and seeking your vote to further my vision for the SOA.
Thanks, Mike. And now we have Sue Sames. Sue, please introduce yourself. You also have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm Sue Sames, and I'm delighted to be here with you. 2016 marks my 25th year as an FSA. It also marks my 30th wedding anniversary. My husband Mike and I have 2 children. Our second child was born 2 days after I got my results for my final set of exams. 2016 also marks my 5th year on the SOA's board, and I've been proud to be of service to the organization in that way. During my board service, I've been serving on all of the major committees. I've been part of the discussion on all of the issues that we've had over the last 5 years. And I have to say I haven't been completely satisfied with the outcomes of all of the decisions that we've made. But having this background, I think, gives me terrific information going forward. I have a deep knowledge of the SOA. I'm a long-standing volunteer. I serve as a presenter. I've chaired experience studies. I've served as a section chair. I've also worked with the Academy on several working groups, and I've served as president of the Hartford Actuaries Club. I am currently a senior consultant with Willis Towers Watson, but I started my career working for insurance companies, and that's given me a wide variety of experience. I started out with ReliaStar in Minneapolis, where I gained experience in valuation and pricing and product management, before switching to John Hancock, where I was there for 5 years. And the switch to consulting mid-career is rather unusual, but I saw the opportunity and challenged myself to take that. I specialize in group insurance, but I've got exposure to all of the major lines of business. I serve as project manager on some of the largest projects that our firm has tackled. And I now lead our group insurance practice for our firm. Working for Willis Towers Watson gives me exposure to issues around the globe. I just finished a project on Solvency II in the UK, and I think one of the great sources we have for innovation is learning how other countries are addressing issues for the insurance industry. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks to each of you for those introductory remarks. As I said earlier, one question was given to the candidates in advance, so they've had time to consider their response. We'll start with that question, and Mike Lombardi will answer it first. The question is simply, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the SOA, and what would you do to help solve it? Mike, please share your comments.
Thank you, Jerry. We have a number of short-term challenges, which I'm sure we will cover later. But in my mind, without a doubt, the biggest long-term challenge we face is maintaining and enhancing the relevance of the actuarial profession and the value of the SOA brand. Let's talk about relevance. The actuarial profession is and should be the leading profession in the measurement and management of financial risk. However, for a variety of reasons, we have not fully embraced this role and for too long have stayed within our comfort zone of insurance and pension regulatory work. Unfortunately, in both fields, our numbers and our level of influence has been declining. So the real question in my mind is, will there still be an actuarial profession for our children and grandchildren? And how do we ensure a positive response? The answer is we clearly need to widen our perspective, to embrace new skills and new areas where actuaries can add value. What kind of new areas? At the moment, the most promising area seems to be risk management, also predictive modeling or big data, and climate change. Tomorrow, others may join the list. In any case, we owe it to our members to make sure that actuaries continue to have the right skills to help employers deal with future risks and opportunities. How do we get there? I believe we need a multi-pronged solution. First, effective marketing to ensure that non-traditional employers are fully aware of the value that actuaries can bring. Second, a relevant syllabus, which will provide the next generation of actuaries with quality training needed to deliver broader solutions. And third, meetings and continuing education to make sure we are providing ample opportunities for non-traditional actuarial pioneers and their organizations to widely broadcast their knowledge and insights gained. Within this broad strategy, we should also consider specific initiatives to improve the outcome. What kind of initiatives? Things like joint research, joint meetings, SOA-sponsored internships, for example, with non-traditional companies such as Google or Netflix. The point of these specific initiatives will be to build alliances and to further broadcast the value that actuaries can bring. The challenge is enormous, but the rewards are well worth the effort.
Thanks, Mike. Sue, the same question to you.
Sure. Thanks, Jerry. I think the biggest challenge that we face is that we're too internally focused. We're spending a lot of our energy on issues that are internally focused to the actuarial profession, and we really need to start branching out and understanding how we're interacting with other professions. We need to become more innovative. We need to become more innovative operationally in order to meet the challenges of the strategic plan, and we need to take an innovative approach to developing the content of our research as well as the continuing education that we're providing. To me, the SOA is about connection and community, and we really need to harness the energy of our members in getting the word out about actuaries. We need to help our members become better communicators. I've been hearing for 30 years since I entered this profession that actuaries are not good communicators, and we really need to tackle this issue. If we're not able to explain the value of what we're bringing in simple business terms, then we're really not being as effective as we can be. We need to look at different ways of providing business skill training to our members. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. I believe the biggest challenge for the SOA is repairing the relationships with the other actuarial organizations, especially the American Academy of Actuaries and the Casualty Actuarial Society. To understand how this rift with the Academy and the CAS developed, we need to go back to the 2011 annual meeting, when Brad Smith in his presidential address announced that there should be only one actuarial organization in the U.S. Shortly thereafter, the SOA offered to merge with the CAS, but the CAS turned us down. In response to this rebuff, we announced in early 2012 that the SOA would offer its own general insurance curriculum and an FSA in general insurance credential. This direct competition, which the CAS viewed as a potential threat, caused that initial rift with the SOA, and the CAS, in a to a somewhat lesser extent with the Academy, as the Academy's membership is about 1/3 CAS members. Then in 2013, the Academy felt the full impact of this new competitive SOA stance when the SOA requested that the NAIC recognize SOA credentialing without Academy oversight for the signing of the general insurance regulatory documents. Shortly thereafter, in an attempt to jumpstart the general insurance program, the SOA offered in a blast email to all CAS actuaries the SOA, FSA, and general insurance credential. In a further escalation of tensions, the Academy subsequently filed ABCD disciplinary charges against the SOA president at that time for representations made in that letter. The SOA then responded with a lawsuit to prevent the ABCD hearing from proceeding. Although the suit was unsuccessful, there was significant publicity surrounding those hostilities. The opportunity now exists for the SOA to take unilateral action to repair these two relationships. All that needs to be done, in my opinion, is for the SOA to place the interests of the actuarial profession ahead of the interests of the SOA and return to its pre-2012 mission of providing world-class actuarial education and research only. By reinstating this prior stance of not competing against the other actuarial organizations, the SOA can lead the three organizations back into an era of cooperation and working jointly together for the benefit of the actuarial profession as a whole.
Sorry. Let's move on to other questions, and please remember you can submit questions throughout the webcast. We'll start with Sue Saint for this question and then alternate with the other candidates in terms of who goes first. What is your vision for the profession, and how do you see the SOA supporting that vision?
Thank you, Jerry. My vision for the SOA, I see us as having a diverse and engaged membership throughout the world. We are a global organization. 20% of our members are in Asia, 30% of our candidates are in Asia. The SOA entered into the general insurance track with a view to what the actuarial profession needed globally. We were the only organization in the world that offered an incomplete education system by not having any offerings at all in general insurance. So the move to get into general insurance was in large part to provide a complete actuarial education for members in Asia. We are going to have to take a look at our resources. The strategic plan calls on us to develop a sustainable resource model, and that includes resources of money and also of time, particularly volunteer time. And we need to make sure that we're expanding globally in a sustainable way, because we could get overextended if we are not careful about where we choose to enter. But that's what I see. And the diversity is very important to me from the business case around diversity, because I think innovation comes from having exposure to people who have different experiences than you do, and people who have different regulatory frameworks and different product ideas. So I can see us working together globally. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. Same question to you, Jim.
Thank you. So I really believe that what we need to do is to take a step back and think about how all of the strategic initiatives that we take on will affect the actuarial profession as the primary mission, and only then to think about how they will affect the SOA. In this way, I think we will accomplish all the things that I talked about in the introductory question, in particular making the organizations work as one for the betterment of the actuarial profession. The other thing I think is really important for us to do is to view how we're going to maximize membership appreciation of the benefits, utilize the CPD more efficiently, help to enhance the credential because of what all the members choose to take on and learn voluntarily, and effectively go at this from the standpoint that we want the members to increase their participation levels, we want their satisfaction with their participation to be higher, and we want to take whatever we need to do from the staff side, even if it's a little more difficult, and oriented towards the betterment of all of the actuaries that are involved in the activities. And I think the third most important thing we need to do is we need to use our resources to communicate outside better. I think we need to use our media resources here to develop more expertise that communicates with the public and with the media. We need to use our research to opine on those things that are clearly actuarial in nature and need the input of actuarial analysis. And I really believe that it's important that we help train, especially our newer FSAs, in communication skills so that they can get started participating as both volunteers and as media representatives at a much earlier time in their career.
Thanks, Jim. Mike, same question to you.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, I believe the natural role of the actuarial profession is to be the leading profession in the measurement and management of financial risk. However, for various reasons, we've not fully embraced this role, and we've lost ground, especially in the insurance and pension regulatory work. In those fields, our numbers are declining or stagnant. So unless we find a way through branding, through examination, and through continuing education to widen our perspectives, the profession will lose its vitality and importance. The SERIA initiative is a start in reversing this trend, as well as a new focus on predictive analytics. But much more needs to be done, whether it is to reach out to employers in industries other than insurance, to students who are considering career options, to educational institutions and universities and actuarial programs, professors, and by seeking out joint sponsorship of conferences and events that have the desired wider focus. We must enhance the actuarial brand and broaden our relevance. The SOA is the largest actuarial organization in the world and has an important role to play in facilitating the strategic outcome, but it cannot do it alone. We must work together with other organizations that share this vision. Unfortunately, in addition to our traditional rivalries, new friction and mistrust have developed in relations between the SOA and other actuarial organizations, all of which only serves to distract our collective efforts. We cannot let our current divisions between organizations permanently deter us from achieving our shared goals. We must build bridges and find new ways to work together to ensure the continuing relevance and success of the actual profession. This should be among the top priorities for the next SOA president.
Thanks, Mike. Next question, we'll start with Jim first. The SOA president is an ambassador of the SOA and represents the organization around the world in many settings within the profession and to society at large. How would you approach your role of being an SOA ambassador? Feel free to share any experiences that you have that qualify you for this.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I have always throughout my career, whether I was flying on an airplane or at a social event or dealing with parents of students trying to find their way who may have some math abilities but don't really know what kind of career they want to go into, promote the fact that the actuarial career is a really big opportunity, that it involves some work to get there, but once you are there, you have yourself on a really good career path. Second, I have been very actively involved with the SOA media staff, in particular representing the long-term care perspectives to the general media, to financial reporters, to Wall Street Journal, to Kiplinger, to various types of publications. And I would really like to see that expanded. I, of course, will continue to do that across all the actuarial issues, because once in the president's slot, you will have a chance to be sought out and quoted and obviously looked upon to represent the SOA and enhance its credential by virtue of being out there and being available to the media.
Thanks, Jim. Mike, same question to you.
Thank you. When I was president of the CIA, and later when I was executive vice president at RGA, I performed a similar ambassadorial role. I met with many organizations, both actuarial and non-actuarial, throughout the world. To me, successful ambassadorship means frequent communication, relationship building, and mutual trust and respect. Okay, so what's our message to the external audiences? We want them to increase awareness of the value of the SOA credentials. We want to promote actuaries as trusted advisors and leaders in the measurement and management of financial risks. The other part of the message is about the SOA. The SOA is a premier provider of actuarial education and research. It's a global organization with a growing membership base throughout the world. And it's increasing actuarial opportunities and promoting expansion into non-traditional areas, such as predictive modeling, capital markets, energy, ERM, and climate change analysis. To achieve this, we need to be reaching out to our key stakeholders and other centers of influence, communicating our key message, and discussing other topics of mutual interest. However, building personal relationships is not enough. As we know, presidents come and go. Every year we have a new one. So lasting value will have to come if we also focus on building ongoing institutional relationships. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Now let's hear from Sue Sames.
Thank you, Jerry. I think the role of ambassador is a useful way of thinking of the role of the president in addressing other organizations. And I think this comes about both within the profession and particularly outside the profession, where we're dealing with organizations and people who aren't as familiar with actuaries. It's particularly important in getting the local actuarial clubs involved in working with students at universities, so that that's one of the aspects of the job that I would look forward to the most, would be meeting with university students. I think besides the ambassadorship, the other concept that's useful for this is hospitality, and recognizing that there is an interpersonal aspect to these relationships, and we want people to feel welcome in our organization. You know, I would approach this with a sense of curiosity about the other organizations, with respect for what the background is that they're bringing and their traditions, and look for ways to work together to accomplish projects that both parties are interested in. I think a good example of this has been the longevity illustrator that the SOA did with the Academy. We're working with the CAS on the climate change index. And I agree, we do need to build bridges with particularly the U.S. organizations, and the board's made a lot of progress on that in the last year. You know, I've had the opportunity to meet with the leaders of the other organizations as we've had them come in and talk to us at the board meetings, and I would continue to build on the momentum that we've gained in that area. And finally, I think it is important for our members to see women in leadership roles. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. The next question we'll hear from Mike Lombardi first. The board is fairly fluid from year to year, with new members joining and some members reaching the end of their term leaving. How would you work to ensure continuity and follow-through on long-term initiatives of the SOA?
Thank you, Jerry. Continuity. The board does turn over and roughly maybe 1/3 per year come on and come off, and we also have continuity already with the staff and the executive director through their work. I'm not sure that's a very very critical point. We do have continuity, and to me that's not a high priority. We do it well, and we continue. For example, even though we have a president that gets elected, they last for 2 or 3, 3 years at least. You have president-elect, you have president and past president. So there's continuity there as well, the leadership team. So I think we do it well. I'm not sure there's much that I would do differently than what we already do. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Sue?
Thank you for the question, Jerry. Continuity is actually something that I'm particularly concerned about for the board. This upcoming election is the first one where we're not going to have the vice presidential positions, and those were typically people who had prior board experience or were otherwise in very senior positions at their companies. So, we lose that additional voice of experience, and that's one of the things that I would bring in this role, is my continuity with my past 5 years of experience. Otherwise, there's no one who's currently sitting on the board who's rotating off, who's on the ballot. And I think that longer-term longevity is very important. In my experience and in talking to other people, it takes about a year to get up to speed with not only the issues, but just sort of the sense of how the board operates. And you have a lot of things in place through the leadership orientation session, through having mentors, but I think that there's more that we could do in terms of really getting more training for people to become coaches and really help our members develop. And I think that having coaches would help both the newer and the more experienced members become more productive in their roles. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Jim, same question to you.
Thank you. I think the ideas that I have for re-engineering the strategic initiatives, especially regarding putting the actuarial profession first and making sure that all of the things that we do strategically enhance membership participation and appreciation of services, will be self-propelling. And effectively what will occur is that everybody will become excited about those as kind of new strategic initiatives, not be as distracted by some of the things that are serving as major distractions now, and that this will just be a natural follow-through. I also, as anybody who knows me from my work in the LTC volunteer activities, don't plan to just disappear after my presidential 3-year term, essentially. I would like to continue volunteering and helping out and talking with people who are continuing to follow afterwards in the board.
Thanks, Jim. Next question we'll hear from Sue first. How would you assess your success at the conclusion of your 3-year term? Please give measurable goals if possible.
Well, I'm not sure I'll be able to think of specific measurable goals, but let me talk about a few things that I'm particularly interested in. And the reason why I say it might be hard to think of measurable goals because my overall priority is innovation, and it might be hard to come up with measurable goals for that. But I think that we've got to find a way to instill innovation in the organization, and I would consider my term to be successful if we start embedding more innovative techniques, both in terms of how we approach things operationally. I'm very excited about the strategic plan and what that is calling on us to do in terms of identifying changes in the environment and instituting sustainable resource models. The other thing I have a real passion for is different approaches to training. And it might surprise you to learn that I take improv comedy lessons. And I think that improv has got a lot of applications for business training. And if we could take some of what has been developed for training using those techniques and customize that for actuaries and really make inroads on actuaries' ability to communicate what we know to different audiences, I think that would be a big success. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Sue. Let's turn it over to Jim Glickman. Same question.
Thank you. I think what would determine success for me are a couple of the big things that I've already talked about, the actuarial profession being viewed as the primary servant of the SOA, and that the participation in the SOA programs has voluntarily increased because we have done a lot of things that I will enumerate in a number of my messages of things I think we could do to increase member participation in our CPD, in keeping retired members active, and in getting new fellows involved. And then third, I think that if we are successful at making actuaries, especially the younger ones, better communicators sooner, that will be a big sign of success. And finally, I think the sections really drive the success of the society, and I would like to see them empowered further, that they can do things that they think will meet the missions of their constituencies, and that they're encouraged both to do increasing CPD as well as to involve the non-actuarial constituencies that they interact with. If we accomplish those 4 things, I think I will have had a very good presidency.
Thanks, Jim. Mike, same question to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a question about legacy. My view is that the president, one year is not a long time to get things done. Many of the initiatives that are underway are multi-year and take a long time to come to fruition. If you think about it, since 1949, the formation of the SOA, you've probably had something over 65 presidents. And if you tested me or other actuaries on what their legacy has been or what they remember them for, I'd be hard-pressed to identify only a small handful of them, let alone all of them. So I think with respect to this question, I think it's best to be humble in this regard. So I would say if I can leave the SOA a better place than I found it, if I can incrementally improve relations with other organizations, if I can help increase the demand for actuaries, and if I can help contribute to the execution of the strategic plan, that's enough of a legacy for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. The next question will start with Jim Glickman. If elected, your term will begin as the SOA's new strategic plan takes effect. Assuming it is adopted in its present form as recently exposed to members for comments, what parts of the plan are among your highest priorities, and what steps would you take to assure the SOA can best succeed in those areas?
Thank you. First off, I believe that the strategic plan has to incorporate those two major factors, and I actually sent in a comment to that effect when it was first circulated. I certainly believe that nothing that I want to do will happen unless I'm successful at meeting with everybody else on the board. As you well know, I haven't been on the board since 2010, and getting to know what's important to them, what they want to see happen, perhaps modify some of my positions and or values, and go together as a team to make sure the strategic plan will work. I certainly believe that the things that I would like to do are things that will be successful, and I think that in meeting with all of those different board people, I will get the chance to show them why. I expect to spend as much time as necessary doing that as I have in all the volunteer activities that I've been involved in. And I do expect that this will lead to a strategic plan that will go on well beyond my presidency.
Thanks, Jim. Same question to you, Mike.
Thank you. The strategic plan is meant to be a review of the social, economic, and demographic trends, and it's supposed to guide our priorities and help us focus on the long term. I know there's a number of groups and task forces that have been looking at this, including the Strategic Planning Task Force. I think there's certain themes that are coming out that I would agree with in this regard. We want to maintain the strength and reputation of the credentials. I'd like to see us promote effective relationships with other actuarial organizations to meet stakeholder needs. I'd like us to find new opportunities. In other words, branching out beyond traditional insurance and pension regulatory work. And, we also want to keep our education content relevant and up to date. And adding predictive analytics to our syllabus is a step in that direction as well. And we also want to inform the public in their understanding of key societal issues by leveraging our research. So those are the themes I think we should be focusing on. One caution I would have is that we need to ensure that the input comes from all of our stakeholders, not just the core volunteers. By this I mean we should be making use of Employers' Council. We should be getting feedback from universities through our Centers for Actuarial Excellence. And we should make use of our Faculty Summit and our student events. And of course we should be asking members for comments, which we have been doing. We also need to pay attention to how we are perceived and do more about our image. On the plus side, we're seen as problem solvers, professional and ethical. We're weaker or seen to be weaker in softer skills, such as communication, project management, and we have low visibility within a corporate hierarchy. So our exams, our meetings, and our continuing education programs need to recognize this more forcefully and address it. When employers think of actuaries, I want them to think of us more than technicians. I want them to think of us as leaders, as problem solvers, as relevant, and as an essential part of the team.
Thanks, Mike. Sue, same question to you.
Thanks, Barry. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the strategic plan, and and I'm very supportive of it, and I think I'd like to see it go even further in certain areas. When we talk about actuaries, and we're not just thinking about SOA members, but actuaries as a whole, as leaders in the measuring and managing of risk, I think we focus a lot, and we feel pretty comfortable about the measurement of risk. And we need to make inroads on becoming better at risk management. I think we still look at mortality as an assumption to be set rather than as a risk to be managed. And I think we need to expand our view on that. I love the idea that actuaries continue to be highly sought-after professionals. We also need to focus on communication and working with teams. We're not going to be in the back room developing complicated solutions for issues. We need to be working with others as we develop solutions, and we need to focus on ways of communicating effectively with other actuaries and other professionals. And I agree with how all of the strategic plan has been laid out, and it's surprising to me. Usually the organizational capabilities are sort of the most standardized part of a strategic plan, but I'm really actually very excited about what we've got as the foundation for the strategic plan, that we work to identify what is happening in the environment, and we work to make changes in a timely manner. I've already talked about the need to have a sustainable resource model, and especially the effective relationships with other organizations. I think it's very helpful that the strategic plan calls that out. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. Next question we'll hear from Mike Lombardi first. In each of your election materials and in some of the comments you've each made this morning, each of you referenced the importance of maintaining good relationships with the other actuarial organizations. What specifically would you do to protect and enhance those relationships? And can you provide an example where you've worked successfully with other people or organizations that had goals in competition with your own? Mike?
Thank you. I think this is one of the most important issues facing the Society of Actuaries. North American actuarial organizations used to work harmoniously with each other, but in recent years, that relationship has been damaged. The SOA has an important role to play in advancing the profession, but it cannot do it alone. Many of us have been embarrassed at the friction that has developed among the actuarial organizations and believe that this infighting needs to stop. I believe some of this has been triggered by the SOA's own actions with two important caveats. Some of the initiatives are or could be good ideas in their own right, but the way they've been introduced, unilaterally and without consultation, shows a lack of collegiality and respect on the part of the SOA. Also, it's more complicated than the headlines. Some of the frictions exist, have always existed, and will continue to exist. Why? Because the different organizations are pursuing different and sometimes overlapping strategies, and it takes a lot of time and effort on both sides to work out a compromise to minimize the potential difficulties. So to be fair, I think some of these clashes are inevitable, given the different missions and strategies that each organization is pursuing, but others are self-inflicted and unnecessary. Is it possibly competitive and collegial at the same time? I believe yes. Think about Harvard and Yale. There's mutual trust and respect, and I think that's one of the key elements that's missing. Communicating through press releases and lawsuits has been a public embarrassment. Nobody's happy, and sincere actuaries on both sides prefer a way out, but it won't be easy. What's needed is, first, we need to reestablish trust. Second, we need to have the leaders and eventually the boards talking honestly to each other about both our differences and common goals. And third, and most importantly, all sides, including the SOA, need to be willing to make compromises for the good of the profession. I'm ready, willing, and able to start this process.
Thanks, Mike. Sue?
Thanks, Jerry. I think it's been very unfortunate how some of this has played out, but I do think that things are getting better. I think every member of the board has the interest of the SOA and of the actuarial profession in mind, and we are committed to creating good relationships. What I would do would be to continue to work on the momentum that we've built in this area, and that includes the personal relationships with the officers in the other organizations, I think it's important for each organization to be clear about what its goals and objectives are, and for us, for the good of the profession, to find areas where we can work together and develop joint projects. I think that so many of the issues that we're facing in society, the impact of mortality, longevity, climate change, there are so many opportunities for actuaries to contribute to the public good that it's a shame that we spend as much time as we do on having to repair relationships. It's just too bad that we have gotten into that situation, and I would continue the work to try to repair those relationships. But I think even with all of that, we have to maintain our focus external to the profession, because the relationship issue is something that really only people in the profession understand what's going on, and we need to work together to help it advance the profession as a whole with other parties. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. Jim, same question to you.
Thank you. It's important to recognize that everybody wants better relationships. Everybody in the SOA, everybody in all the other organizations. However, better relationships happen when the outcomes are viewed through the other organization's viewpoint. My plans, as I've outlined a couple different times in the other questions, when viewed through the other organization's lens, I believe will lead to a much better relationship with those other organizations and will allow all of us to accomplish the goals that are necessary for the actuarial profession. Now, one of the reasons that, really the other half of the question was asking, what are the reasons why I have had experiences or can deliver on that? And I would point to two very major activities that I've been involved in. Obviously, professionally, I've been the president and CEO of a startup reinsurance company that took $3 million of borrowed capital, and we're now at $2.1 billion reinsurer. We have relationships with more than a dozen of the largest insurance companies in the country, and most of those were based on the fact that we could figure out with them what they valued, help them figure out with us what we valued, and find the maximum possible strategy that meets both of those sets of goals. It is so important in developing any of these relationships and in making them stronger that you understand really well what it is that's important to the other person, and especially those things that don't matter that much to you but matter a lot to them are met, so that when the things that matter a lot to you and don't matter that much to them will be accepted by them as things to do for us. The other, and perhaps even more dramatic because it's related to the volunteer activities, is I've spent the last 11 years as the volunteer executive director of the Intercompany Long-Term Care Insurance Conference Association. This has run a conference that has gone from 250 people up to 1,000 and involves trying to round up volunteers, all with their own ideas, and help guide them through the process.
Thanks, Jim. Next question will start with Sue Sames. How should the strategic plan help new actuaries use their modeling expertise to be a floor to their career rather than a ceiling? Lots of candidates talk about C-suite thinking and presentation skills, but what is being done about it?
I'm sorry, Greg. Can you repeat the question?
Of course. How does the strategic plan help the new actuaries use their modeling expertise to be a floor to their career rather than a ceiling? Lots of candidates talk about C-suite thinking and presentation skills, but what is being done about it?
Thank you, Jerry. The strategic plan is at a very high level, and we need to take it and develop initiatives that help us achieve the objectives that are laid out here. And I think one of the issues that we need to do is to look at it from the lens of members as well as for new actuaries. So I think that it's a good point about predictive analytics as being a being a floor, we need to get actuaries involved in predictive analytics, and some of that is just going to take a little bit of time in terms of getting the right people in those positions. And the SOA has been working to make inroads in that area, but I think a lot of it is just going to be a combination of technical and business training. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. Over to you, Jim.
Well, certainly I am very much in favor of both predictive analytics being brought into the exam system as well as enhanced modeling techniques. To me, that is part of the professional training leading to better answers, leading to better skill sets to develop answers. However, I think it's really disjoint from the other half of the question, which is, how will that help the actuarial profession and how will that help get the word out to other people? And I think that really is much more directly connected to the goal that I have of enhancing the communication skills. Probably the single biggest piece of the FSA exams, at least as they existed about 5 to 7 years ago, I saw when my middle son, Mark, who was an FSA in 2011, had to take the 3-day take-home exam that essentially involved a project that he was going to be the consulting actuary of a particular company and had to present to non-actuaries his conclusions, rationale for conclusions, etc. Those communication skills were very difficult for him to go through, but he successfully got through them. I think he has become much more proficient because of that exam, and I would actually encourage that there be more direct education on those type of skill sets.
Thanks, Jim. Over to you, Mike.
Okay. Much as I favor predictive analytics and modeling, I do believe that as actuaries we're more than technicians. Modeling and tools like that modeling is a tool. It's a means to a solution. So the point is we want actuaries to be providing relevant business solutions. So I wouldn't focus so much on the modeling skills. I would think the strategic plan should focus more about how we're viewed and where we're weaker. As I mentioned earlier, our interpersonal skills, our communication skills, project management. We should be encouraging new students to seriously consider internships, as getting that on your resume is important. And business acumen. All these things I think can be addressed. And continuing education is another means to do that for the existing actuaries as well. So I think my overall comment then is that modeling is a tool. The focus should be on solutions and on business and interpersonal skills.
Thanks, Mike. For the next question, we'll start with Jim Glickman. The role of the SOA president requires working collaboratively with the board and is a role of persuasion and diplomacy. It requires listening as much as talking and maintaining an open mind. Can you describe a situation where your opinions differed from those of others and they successfully convinced you to change your mind?
Thank you. Yes, as you can well imagine, both in my role as president, where rather than dictating what's going to happen in the company, I really was the person who would be the face of the company and lead outward those decisions that were made by our senior people, and those senior people likewise had to draw from the people who worked for them to get the best solutions. When we started up 30 years ago and were pioneers in the long-term care space, it was very difficult to necessarily find the best routes. We had a lot of good decision-making. Several times I can remember instances where my gut said that this wasn't the right way to go. But I did realize that as long as I didn't think what might be pursued would bring harm, I always encouraged my people to pursue those, and if they were successful, and many times they were, I would then help enhance it and take it out farther. And likewise, if it did seem to be stalling out, I was able to come in and gracefully, without affecting people's feelings or willingness to contribute in the future, help kind of end the process and move on to the next phase. And as I started to mention before, whenever you work, as I have for the last 11 years, with upwards of 250 volunteers to put on the Long-Term Care Annual Conference every year, you can imagine that with all the volunteers actually doing all the work, that there are lots and lots of different ideas. The conference used to run a full 3.5 days. And about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less, the committee, the executive committee really thought that they wanted to cut it down to 3. And I wasn't in favor of that because I thought the shorter we make the conference, the less important it becomes to the people. You could wind up in a spiral of essentially feeling like the conference is going down in quality. And as such, I reluctantly but fully supported going ahead with that, at least for the next conference. It turned out it worked very well. Everybody, including myself, got totally behind it. And we found that we could get the same feel without the same 3.5-day commitment by adding on optional pre-conference and post-conference activities at no additional charge that people could either choose to come longer or not stay as long, so that we met a wider range of people and interests instead.
Thanks, Jim. Mike, the same question for you.
Yeah, I find the question very interesting. I've often changed my mind, and part of the reason I change my mind is I don't start off with an entrenched view. Going back to some of my experience, I've been president of the Canadian Institute of Actuaries Board. I've also been project manager for a lot of RG and M&A initiatives. So leadership to me means choosing one's priorities and managing the organization in such a way as to ensure that a diverse group of people with different skills work together towards a common goal. I found that effective leaders are those who can put themselves in the shoes of others who can understand different positions, and those who seek win-win solutions, but nevertheless are able to show firmness of resolve. And I would do that in defending core SOA values. So looking forward, as SOA leader, I would seek out members' views. I would respond to their concerns. I would contribute to and clearly communicate the organization's strategic direction. And in my interaction with the board, prior to bringing any matters to a vote, I would seek out the counsel of others, board members, respected colleagues, and experts. So I would use my collaborative skills to build alliances and find common ground.
Thanks, Mike. Let's hear from Sue.
Thanks, Jerry. I've come across this situation many times in the board discussions because I think we are addressing issues that are complicated and have a lot of background to them and a lot of impact, and it's important to hear from a variety of different viewpoints. When I go into a board discussion, I'll have read background material on it, and we have a presentation, and I'm also listening to the comments from the other board members. Over time, I've learned to hold off on expressing my view and kind of see how the discussion is going and try to maintain more of a neutral stance before finally making up my mind in that regard. You know, I think we've learned over and over again that you don't have all of the background, and that it's in any situation, and it's not possible to anticipate all of the ramifications of things. And I've also learned to approach things with more empathy for the other side of the aisle. I think my most recent example of where I changed my mind was on the North Carolina issue that came up recently, whereas originally when I was thinking about the letter ahead of time, you know, I wasn't sure. You know, it didn't seem clear to me why we should do this. I didn't think that any of us was of the opinion that signing the letter from the Society of Actuaries would move the governor along. But in the end, what I decided to side on was the side of the members and following the diversity and inclusion statement that the board had just adopted. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. Our next question we'll hear from Mike Lombardi first. The SOA has devoted substantial resources to research and societal issues in recent years. What do you think is the best way to conduct and publicize such work so as to avoid tarnishing our reputation for objectivity and to avoid confusion with the roles of the other actuarial organizations?
Research is a very important part of what the SOA does, and it broadcasts what we do. It's the foundation for the actuarial insights and builds up on everything else that we do. The other part of the question was, what can we do? Sorry, Jerry, can you repeat that?
Sure.
Second half.
I'll read the entire question. The SOA has devoted substantial resources to research and societal issues in recent years. What do you think is the best way to conduct and publicize such work so as to avoid tarnishing our reputation for objectivity and to avoid confusion with the roles of other actuarial organizations?
Sorry, it's on. Okay. Yeah, the best way is to publish our research and let it stand on its own. We shouldn't be taking any positions. For example, the Blue Ribbon Panel research that we did, we've indicated what the issues were, the pros and cons of certain actions and that type of thing, and I think that's where we should leave it. If we want to actually lobby or push for something in the public domain, I think we should leave that to the Academy in the U.S. arena and also to the CIA in the Canadian space. But I think our research, we do it well. We publish it. We have calls for papers and things like that. And I'm very happy with what we do. And I think we should stick to the purely scientific part of it rather than the lobbying. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Same question for you, Sue.
Sure. Thanks, Jerry. I think on research in general, as well as research on societal issues, we need to make sure we have enough of a budget on research and that we're covering enough ground and we've got our priorities straight. I think we also have to look at the balance of research that's done in the U.S. and make sure that we're covering members in other areas, in Canada and in Asia. I don't think we've got a role in lobbying, but I do think we've got a role in developing thoughtful research and publicizing it. And sometimes I think we do research and we aren't doing enough to get the word out about it, and we're not doing enough to really help members and other people find it on an ongoing basis. I was talking to Anna Rappaport about some of the retirement risk research that she's done, and that's been it's very valuable research. It's not lobbying. It's something that could be very useful to people, and it's just very hard to find it. So I think that there's more that we could do to make it user friendly. And in terms of coordinating with the other organizations, I think the key to that is continuing to work on having good relationships with them and communicating. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. Jim, let's hear from you.
Okay. There are two things going on in your question. First one is, obviously, there is what I would call the pure research, the experience studies, all of the things we do to provide data that's used by all of our constituencies, actuarial and non-actuarial, to help perform their roles. The second one you brought up is society issues, and that gets to be a much trickier point. I obviously think that we should be providing input on societal issues that utilize the actuarial skill sets. I really am against us getting involved in society issues because there are so many. Some of them we have, for example, relationships that prevent us from wanting to say what we might otherwise want to say. I think we're just better staying out of political, non-actuarial society issues. Now, with regard to the financial issues, I believe that it is very important not just to leave it to the Academy, but to figure out how to work with the Academy. And I'm going to give it as an example. Back in 2009, very few people will probably remember outside of the long-term care space, but there was a part of the ACA that had something called the Class Act. The Class Act was going to provide a guaranteed issue, voluntary purchase, long-term care program to everybody in the United States. And one of the things that the long-term care section realized is that that could not possibly work. At best case, it would take a lot of money away from a lot of disabled people who couldn't afford it, and they'd be left with nothing when it went bankrupt. Or perhaps even worse, it would become the fourth national entitlement program. What we did is we went to the Academy, because most of the people in the long-term care space are members, including myself, of both the Academy Long-Term Care Task Force and the Society's Long-Term Care section. And because of ACA, they didn't have the time to do it. So the section actually did all the work and then turned it over to the Academy's task force. And those same people helped work with the task force to get the legislation in Congress changed. And we were successful, and because of that, there is no fourth entitlement program.
Thanks, Jim. Next question, we're going to turn to Sue Sames first. Risk management is becoming increasingly important for insurance companies and other risk-bearing groups. Yet in many cases, this work is being done by accountants, statisticians, and other professionals. What steps should the SOA take to increase the relevance of and need for actuaries in this space?
Thank you, Jerry. I think that if you look at the phrase, the measuring and managing of risk, that where actuaries have traditionally focused has been on the measurement side, on the how do you avoid the worst case scenario, and haven't really been as involved in helping companies come up with solutions, helping companies figure out which risks they should be taking. And I think that we need to work with the Employers Council, work with actuaries who are in that role, and help figure out a way for actuaries to gain experience in that area. And I think part of it too is the recognition that our techniques and our ways of measurement kind of only take us so far. You know, there's kind of the book knowledge, and then there's the know-how that's needed on the job. And I think that we're seen as being weak in that second area. And I think we can work with employers in that area to really help develop people. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. Jim?
Thank you. I believe the challenge is not nearly so focused on measuring the risk or figuring out what the risk is or what the tails look like to those risks, but in communicating those effectively so that management can properly act upon them. In particular, I believe that focusing on communication skills will go a long way in that direction. But perhaps more importantly, I think it's important for the sections to drive that in their specialized areas. And I'll cite as an example something the LTC section took upon themselves. As many people know, the long-term care product line has been challenged, and it's been challenged for lots of reasons, most of which aren't well understood outside of the specialists in long-term care. And they have to do with lapse rates and with interest rates having been much lower than what they were supposed to be under the projections. And because of that, the non-actuarial management actually took actions that were so conservative, it really failed to analyze the risk properly. And that's still a major factor today. Now, one of the things that the people who the long-term care section wanted to address were the non-actuaries in the long-term care field. And as such, the section organized a group of 13 long-term care experts from all the different companies and the different consulting firms to take on a project of analyzing what is the real risk associated with a long-term care product priced in today's environment with today's knowledge. And what happened in that circumstance is that although it was a very challenging, drawn-out process, we got all of the companies in the field to participate. We got really good data, And in 2015, we first revealed the results in a presentation to the Long-Term Care Industries National Conference. Since then, we've done another half dozen presentations for lots of actuarial and non-actuarial constituencies, trying to educate them as to what the reality of the marketplace is versus what the perception is. And we have just started working with the SOA's media department to start to disseminate that information out to the consumers, the media magazine, the financial analyst media personnel, and to try to change the image, bifurcate the problems of the past from the quality products that are available with good knowledge going forward.
Thanks, Jim. Same question for you, Mike.
Thank you. I think the question goes to the heart of the matter about the demand for actuaries and our relevance. The SOA has recently completed an actuarial talent benchmark study examining the supply and demand of actuaries from now till 2020. The current reality is that there's an oversupply of actuaries at the entry level and an undersupply at the mid-career position. We also face competition from others for the best and brightest candidates, so I think it's definitely an issue. I certainly favor encouraging developments of new areas, such as predictive analytics. Actuaries in other countries are also branching out into new fields. In Australia and South Africa, they're getting into banking. In Mexico, they're taking on HR roles. In the UK, actuaries are working on environmental sustainability. And here in the USA and Canada, actuaries are moving into ERM and healthcare. To me, success is a combination of top-down and bottom-up. What do I mean by that? By bottom-up, I mean individual pioneers in new areas, such as ERM or predictive analytics or capital markets. So when someone succeeds in developing a new field, they demonstrate the value that actuaries can bring, and we all shine by that reflected light. Top-down is what the SOA and other organizations can do collectively to open up new fields. What are some of these new things that they can do? We could do marketing efforts to existing employers or potential employers, promoting the value that actuaries can bring to the business. We could do media training of key people to bring greater awareness and interest in the profession. In research, we could have award grants to fund research and expand boundaries in those areas where actuarial expertise can be usefully applied. Business acumen is also an area for improvement. Actuaries need to improve their communication and interpersonal skills. We can offer more effective training. Finally, we can partner with other organizations in finance, statistics, and risk management to hold joint seminars and also to have our work published in their publications. The goal is to make sure that we remain highly sought professionals and that stakeholders continue to seek out our members for their unique skills and high ethical standards.
Thanks, Mike. For the next question, we'll hear first from Jim Glickman. What is your vision for the SOA's global role?
Thank you. My goal is for the SOA to be recognized throughout the world as the premier provider of education and research. And to the extent that in the other parts of the world where the actuarial societies are not very well developed, I think we will have a much heavier role in that process. In the countries where they do have pretty well-developed actuarial societies, I think it will be working with them, doing joint projects, and enhancing what they already bring to their membership. I think it's important for us not to try to become the, what I'll call, larger version of the International Actuarial Association. I think it's important that what we do be focused on our primary missions and goal, which are to be premier educators and researchers.
Thanks, Jim. Mike, same question for you.
Thank you. International growth is a strong passion of mine, and it should be for the SOA as well. Why? Well, for me, my work, my foreign language skills, and my volunteer efforts have enabled me to meet with senior actuarial leaders in over 20 countries, making me especially sensitive to different business practices and cultures throughout the world. For the SOA is a global organization with a rapidly expanding international member base in over 80 countries. To remain effective, we need to provide tailored services to international actuaries and to foster a sense of community with all members, regardless of where they are located. International growth provides more opportunities for actuaries to work with global companies in their home territory, and it also provides opportunities for actuaries to work in more countries and locations. The SOA has much to offer as a premier provider of education and research, but let's be clear. We're not there to supplant local organizations. We should work with other organizations where they exist, and where there are none, of course, we can do it alone. Also, we should pick our spots carefully and focus on areas where we are interested in, such as China or maybe in the future Latin America. Coming back to Asia, 5 of the top SOA exam centers right now are in Asia. Travel time and time zone challenges make it more difficult to support those members. This broadcast is a case in point. Right now it's past midnight in China as we speak. But there's more we could be doing and should be doing. Earlier this year we opened up an SOA China office in Beijing, and this is on top of the joint office we have in Hong Kong. We need to service that group and make sure it continues to grow. How? We should consider doing more in such areas as marketing the profession, developing local content exams, enhancing our career education offerings, and providing more real-time webinars.
Thanks, Mike. Let's hear from Sue.
Thank you, Jerry. I think education and research globally is just tremendously exciting. When we think about the SOA as being part of how we connect with others, a developing community, having the chance to expand that globally, as I said, is just tremendously exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for innovation as we compare how products are developed in one area versus another, what the context is in one area versus another, and our chance to get to know people in other cultures. I think that's just tremendously exciting. We, of course, have to be very aware of and careful with our relationships with organizations, and I think we are going into that with a good attitude. The other piece that I would emphasize from the strategic plan is the need to have a good system of budgeting for this so that we make sure that areas outside the U.S. get the benefit of the research that we can provide. And we also, above everything else, need a sustainable resource model so that we get adequate volunteer time and other resources to sustain our efforts in other areas. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, for our final question, we'll start with Mike Lombardi. What is motivating you to be President-Elect, and what differentiates you from the other candidates?
It's an interesting question. There's 3 reasons, I would say. First, I have a passion for the actuarial profession. It's been very good to me financially, socially, and professionally. And I also believe in giving back. I've been volunteering now for over 30 years with different actuarial organizations, the SOA, the CIA, and the IAA. I want to see the profession thrive and grow. My second reason is I have broad actuarial experience spanning several practice areas and geographies. By this I mean that I've worked in insurance, reinsurance, and consulting. I've worked in Canada, USA, Europe, and Asia. And I've worked in life, PC, health insurance, and pensions. And third, I have leadership and experience qualifications to do the job. I've been president of the CIA, a similar role, obviously a smaller organization, and I've chaired committees. I've been a vice president of the SOA, and I understand the SOA governance and strategic perspectives. And also I ran for President-Elect last year, a process that allowed me to focus on key issues and connect one-on-one with SOA members, many of whom encouraged me to run again. So in summary, motivation, broad actuarial experience, and leadership skills.
Thanks, Mike. Same question to you, Sue.
Sure. Thank you, Jerry. The primary reason why I'm running for President-Elect is that I was asked. I was asked by people who I serve with on the board, and it wasn't just the, oh yeah, you should consider it. It was a long conversation about what the leadership traits were that they saw that the president was required of the president, including an ability to collaborate, a broad understanding of the issues that we've been facing. And I was also seen as someone that the members could relate to. So the primary reason why I'm running is that I was asked to by people that I respect. And I spent a lot of time thinking about whether this was the right time in my career to do this. And I do feel that at this time, because of my background in the issues, that this, and with my passion for personal growth that I want to pass on to our members, that I'm a good person to fit this role. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Sue. Jim, same question to you.
Thank you. I believe that I've outlined a plan that will make the SOA better for decades to come, especially given some of the very unique circumstances that I have gone through in my 40-year career. First off, I was the executive director, and still am, of a 501c3 nonprofit organization, the ILTCI. And I participated both in its founding, in its development, in its organization. I learned as I went in terms of things that are opportunities, things that are impediments. And I think I have the unique kind of background that almost nobody else could have gained unless they had done something similar to understand better how the workings of the SOA can be improved and how membership can be served better. The second one may be equally as unique, and that is the fact that I actually have an entrepreneurial background. I was the founder of 21st Century, which is the holding company for Life Care Assurance Company. I actually got all of the initial venture funding to get it going. We started with $3 million of borrowed funds, and we're now the, 110th largest insurance company in the U.S. And we built an organization that serves a lot of very big companies, understands some of the interorganizational problems. Because just as we've been talking, all of us, about challenges dealing with the other actuarial organizations, it's no more difficult for us to be dealing with some of the top 20 insurance companies as our clients and having to understand how they look at things and figure out how we can work within their structures and still meet our goals.
Thank you. Well, that's about all the time we have for this webinar. One more reminder, the elections for the SOA Board of Directors and Section Councils will open on August 22nd and close on September 9th. Special thanks to all three candidates and all the members who participated in the webinar. I hope this webinar will help you make an informed decision when you vote. Of course, there's additional information about all the candidates in the for the SOA Board election on the SOA website.
Well, that is the end of our time today. Thanks to Jerry for moderating this webinar, and thank you to our President-Elect candidates. There is an evaluation of this webinar in the links box, and we really would appreciate if you would take a few moments to complete that. And if you're eligible, please don't forget to vote. As Jerry said, elections open August 22nd. Have a great day, everyone.